From Los Angeles, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand. Thanks for joining us for another edition of the Puck Podcast. It is Monday, June the 23rd, 2025. This is our first period of a three-period podcast. The first period, which some of you are watching on YouTube, is going to recap the conclusion of the Stanley Cup Finals. Plus, we'll have the latest news from around the NHL from the past week, including a trade that went down just moments before we started doing this show. It involves one of our favorite teams. Second period is our interview or special feature segment. Doug and I are going to be discussing this week's NHL draft, which we are both excited to say we will be attending in person here in Los Angeles. And in the third period, it's our fan feedback segment. We read listener emails and have our off-ice report. We'll tell you why we're doing this show a little bit later than we normally do. You can find all three of the periods of the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you're seeing on YouTube, please like and subscribe and get notified when our latest episodes are out.
Eddie and I have combined for over 50 years of sports media membership, and we've been members of the NHL media for 19 seasons now. We just completed our 19th season. We have been covering the NHL on this show and all 32 teams equally since 2006. We do the show every single week, and every week we start off with the big story around the league, wherever it may have been. And for that, I turn it back over to my co-host and my good friend, Eddie Garcia.
Thank you, Doug. And of course, we start with the conclusion of the Stanley Cup Final. We knew it would be over by the time we did our next show, regardless of it went 6 or 7 games. When we last left you, a huge Game 5 win for the Florida Panthers in Edmonton, 5-2 to give them a 3-2 series lead and move them 1 win away from repeating as Stanley Cup champions. They could close it out on home ice in Game 6, which was last Tuesday. And the big story, I guess, going into the game was who would start in net for the Edmonton Oilers. As expected, Stuart Skinner would get the assignment replacing Calvin Pickard, who had lost in Game 5 when he replaced Stuart Skinner the game before. As for game number 6, Doug talked about it on last week's show, and a lot of people certainly were on the same page as his opinion. The Florida Panthers were getting off to great starts. If Edmonton was going to extend this thing to a Game 7, they would need to get off to a good start and, in particular, result in a goal or two. And that did not happen. Sam Reinhart, on an amazing move with just 4 minutes and 36 seconds into the opening period, would score to give the Panthers a 1-0 lead, took the puck from Evan Bouchard just outside the Florida zone, skated in on and then through Matthias Ekholm, and then beat Stuart Skinner with a wrist shot while falling down over Stewart's glove on a flutter shot. Amazing individual effort. Crowd goes wild, and once again, the Oilers are trailing in the first period.
Not only are they trailing, but it gets the home crowd in Florida into the game. They were already fired up. They knew there was a chance to win the Stanley Cup on home ice. This would be their only chance to win it on home ice, because if it went 7, it would obviously be back in Edmonton. So the home crowd is fired up. And if you were hoping for a great performance from Stuart Skinner, I'm not saying that's an easy save, but that's the kind of save you need to make in a Game 7 to keep the game scoreless, to bail your team out and give your team a little bit extra chances to get that first goal. Didn't happen. And so then it became an imperative on the Oilers to score the next goal, which they did not do.
No, the Panthers would bookend an opening period with an early goal and a late goal, just 47 seconds left in the opening period. Matthew Tkachuk would make it 2-0. Oilers turn it over at their own blue line. Eetu Luostarinen was skated into the Edmonton zone, passed it to a trailing Tkachuk who had a ton of time and space, let a pretty routine wrist shot go with a bit of a screen from Anton Lundell. The shot goes over the glove of Stuart Skinner and in, and it's 2-0 Florida after 1. The exact start that they wanted and the exact start the Oilers did not want.
Right, but we do know the Oilers have come back from being behind in games early many times in this postseason, but you don't want to keep putting yourself in that position in a must-win game. Now, with that goal, you mentioned the first one, great move by Sam Reinhart, great play. This one, I don't know if the Oilers got lazy at the end of the period and just thought it was getting close to the end, but it was a very bad turnover and then bad defense in their own zone in front of him. And then I thought a soft goal against Stuart Skinner. And at that point, I thought I would put in Calvin Pickard for the second period if it was me. So I was curious if they made a goaltending change during the intermission, just to change things, give them a different look, try and give something else, kind of use every card in the deck before you go out. And but that was not what happened.
No, it was not. And certainly advisable for the Oilers to at least get the next goal. And that did not happen. Sam Reinhart would score his second of the game, only goal of the second period. Very weird play by Stuart Skinner. Carter Verhaeghe flipped the puck on net from the boards, not dangerous in any way. But instead of gloving the puck and getting a whistle, Stuart Skinner kind of shoulder shrugged it. And the rebound goes to Alexander Barkov. He passes it in the blue paint to Sam Reinhart. His stick was down, but it goes off his skate and in. No kicking motion. 3-0 Panthers.
I don't know what happened there with Skinner on that one, whether he thought it was going to go wide, whether he thought there was a stoppage in play. His reaction was very odd, but it was very casual and just almost like a warm up of just kind of just knock it down, and then didn't seem to be that panicked at the rebound either. So very odd. And I'm not sure what he thought was happening out there. I don't think he addressed it too much afterwards, explaining like, oh, I thought this, that, and the other. I think it was just a bad play by him, whether it was a lapse in judgment or he thought he had help there that would clear it. But very bad play. It ends up being a third goal, Reinhardt's second. Going into the second intermission, down 3-0. The cup is being polished. It's out of the case. The place is going crazy. And the Panthers now know we win. We just don't give up 3 goals in this period and we're going to win the Stanley Cup. That's a tough place to have to come back from. And the Oilers were not getting anything sustained as far as pressure against Sergei Bobrovsky. They were not showing any signs that they were going to come back and score 3 goals, maybe 4 goals to win this game in regulation. So it did not look good for Edmonton going into that third.
Certainly not. And down 3-0 in the third, about 7 minutes left, they would end up pulling the goalie for the extra attacker. Sam Reinhart would finish off the hat trick, his first career postseason 3-goal game with an empty net goal to make it 4-0. And he would score a second empty net goal for the Stanley Cup Finals pants trick. If you don't know, then you haven't been listening long enough. Edmonton's Vladimir Podkolzin would spoil the shutout bid for Sergei Bobrovsky with a late goal, but too little too late. Convincing 5-1 win for the Florida Panthers. They win the series 4-2 and capture their second consecutive Stanley Cup title and the second title in franchise history.
And against the same team. It's they beat the Oilers both years. They've been in the Stanley Cup final 3 years in a row. Now they obviously lost the first trip, but then have now won back-to-back. So I don't think anybody could argue that this is anything less than dominant performance by Florida the last 24 months that we've seen this team on the ice. You go back to their first trip to the Stanley Cup final, and it was kind of a surprise. You thought, wow, I can't believe this. It really worked out. Those moves they made to get Matthew Tkachuk really worked out. That trade, was debated at the time, but that really worked out. Then they come back the next year. They make another run. They win the Stanley Cup. They come back this year, and they lost a lot in free agency. They lost a lot of their depth. But the move to get Brad Marchand at the deadline, the move to shore up the depth, the move to go and get as well Seth Jones.
Seth Jones.
Yeah, those 2 moves gave them the depth that they lost in the offseason last year, made them just almost an impossible team to beat 4 times in 7 games. They were down 2-0 to the Maple Leafs in their series. The Oilers were down 2-0 to the Kings in their series. Both came back, obviously, to win and advance. So both teams faced elimination, essentially. Were facing some real adversity in these playoffs, but came through and overcame it. And for Edmonton, it's gutting to be in back-to-back Stanley Cup final and come away with nothing. To have the best players in the league on paper, and for many people on the ice as well, in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, and not have a Stanley Cup. But the Florida Panthers, when you go down the list, and we're in the off season now, we're going to talk about team building and roster building the rest of the summer. All the things that we're looking to add to your team are what the Florida Panthers have in spades. They have the goaltending talent. They have quality depth. They have star players. They have guys that come through in the playoffs. They have grit. They have speed. They have scoring ability. They have defensive ability, and they have the coaching. So the Florida Panthers are built to win. They came through again, and it was as you said, a dominant 5-1 win. And Edmonton put up a fight in this series, but was just overmatched ultimately. And the depth scoring that they had enjoyed, it didn't hurt that Zach Hyman was out for this entire series, but the depth scoring did not come through for him. It had throughout the first 3 rounds. And when it's all on Connor McDavid, when it's all on Leon Draisaitl, and those 2 guys are shut down, it becomes very difficult to win, especially when you're not getting elite goaltending. So tough matchup for Edmonton, but Florida, back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. I mean, absolutely amazing what they've been able to build and sustain in South Florida right now. The class of the NHL by far.
So I've got a number of little notes and facts that I'm going to read off for both teams. And I'll pause briefly after each one. If you want to jump in and share any thoughts on any of these things, feel free. We'll start with the performance of Sergei Bobrovsky. Allowed 1 goal on 29 shots in the Game 6 victory. Ended up allowing 2 or fewer goals in 6 of his last 7 home playoff starts. Sam Reinhart, just the 6th player in finals history to have a pants trick, a 4-goal game. First to do it since Maurice Rocket Richard in 1957.
Wow, that is remarkable. Have any of them done it in a cup clinching game?
I do not have that one. That's a good question. Can't have the answer for you on that one. Florida, the first back-to-back winner since the Lightning in 2020 and 2021. Panthers have won 11 of 12 playoff series since Paul Maurice took over as head coach.
Just the fact that Florida has become the place for great hockey in the last 10 years is remarkable. The last 6 years, 2 back-to-back Stanley Cup champions in the state of Florida.
Panthers outscored the Oilers 13-4 in the first periods of the series and led for a finals record 255 minutes and 49 seconds in the series. Stuart Skinner allowed 3 goals on 23 shots in the loss. Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, Evan Bouchard were all a -4 in the deciding Game 6. Of course, McDavid, just the 1 goal in the series. And look, Florida has, as we mentioned, they've got a Selke Trophy winner and a Selke Trophy runner-up and a good defense team-wise and a good goaltender. But I still think, when you're Connor McDavid and you're the greatest player in the world, probably need more than 1 goal in the 6 final games.
Well, his comment right after the game reflected a little bit of frustration with the coaching. I think when he said, we kept trying the same thing over and over again, banging our heads against the wall. And I think he was realizing what we're doing is not working. We need to adjust, try something different. They did not. The forecheck by the Panthers was effective time and time again. And you really, as you watch these games, you didn't see a lot of sustained offensive pressure from Edmonton. They would get rushes, they would get chances, but there were not like multiple chances where you thought either they're going to score a goal or the Panthers are going to take a penalty here. But you did see that from Florida from time to time. And when Florida capitalizes on their chances and Edmonton doesn't, makes it the series we saw.
I did want to mention that Evander Kane was ejected in the final minutes of this one after slashing Matthew Tkachuk and did not come out for the handshake line. So not a good look for a guy who doesn't have the greatest reputation as it is. But okay, good for you. Oilers have now lost consecutive Stanley Cup Finals. The last time that happened, the Boston Bruins lost 2 straight trips to the finals in 1977 and 78. They did not make it back to the final in 1979. 32 years now since a Canadian team has won the Stanley Cup. Sam Bennett, your Conn Smythe Trophy winner, leading the postseason with 15 goals.
And a free agent next week, potentially.
We shall see. I did enjoy how the Florida Panthers passed out the cup. All the guys who had never won it before got the cup first after Captain Alexander Barkov, which I thought was interesting. Even the 3rd string goalie, who I'd never even heard of him. But I thought that was pretty classy to let all the guys who had not won it yet win it. And it started with, the veteran guys like Seth Jones and Nate Schmidt. And who was it? No Thomas No Stick, guys like that. I thought that was pretty cool, but a pretty cool way to do
That's
that.
the luxury of being a team that wins back to back.
For sure.
Like, I just skated this last year on this ice. Hey, let them have their moment first. But yes, that is nice because those guys, it means obviously a lot to them. And you always need those guys to kind of push your team as far as let's win it for Nate. Let's win it for the different guy. I don't think they're winning it for the third string goalie, but Nosek is also a free agent this summer. And that's a guy that I can see a lot of teams being interested in. He played great on the fourth line. And again, you're going to need, there's people that can get you to the playoffs and there's people that help you win in the playoffs. He proves that he's a guy that can help you win in the playoffs. And a lot of teams are going to be interested in that.
Obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about what the Panthers have to do in the offseason. You mentioned Sam Bennett, but we've had now back-to-back champs. Last time we had the three-peat was the New York Islanders, who won 4 in a row from 1980 to 1983. Florida would be looking next year not only for their third straight title, but a fourth straight trip to the Stanley Cup Finals. We shall see. They should still be a very strong team next year, but there are some questions that need to be answered. Certainly, they have been very much enjoying themselves since winning the Cup. If you've seen any of this stuff on social media, they are maybe pushing the Washington Capitals for this second time around too. This is not the first time, but they are very much enjoying themselves. They are partying it up. They had their victory parade and get together, and it's those things that a lot of cringy moments as well, but it's for their fans, and their fans all love it. It's the obligatory cursing into the microphone and being half drunk and things like that. We did have a couple of declarations from a couple of players. Sam Bennett did tell a crowd, and again, he was half in the bag or maybe fully in the bag when he said it, but he did say something about being around for 8 more years. Brad Marchand was at a bar and somebody said 1 more year, and he said, no, 4 more years, and held up 4 fingers. Were they tipping their hand to something? Were they sharing something that hasn't been officially announced yet? I don't know, because again, they were enjoying themselves. Who knows? But Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand, Aaron Ekblad, the major names that Bill Zito said he's going to try his best to bring them all back. I don't know how realistic that is, but we shall see.
Well, I think it was absolutely tipping their hands a bit, because why would you say that if that wasn't already in discussions? I mean, if you were going to go to free agency and you had no contract in place, you had nothing, that would be very odd to indicate that. They've called alcohol the truth serum before, and I think we will not be shocked if he signs a 4-year deal with the Florida Panthers before July 1st. But I think there was somebody on Facebook, friend of the show, that came up with this idea and said, I can't believe this hasn't been made into a movie already. And it is related to the way the Panthers and the Capitals, as you said, were celebrating. Of a team wins the Stanley Cup, they go absolutely crazy. They wake up the next morning, it's missing. And it's a dude, where's my car, but for the Stanley Cup. And
like the Hangover.
The Hangover Stanley Cup edition, 100%.
Yeah. And
they have to retrace their steps of the wild night that they had. And that seems like an absolute no-brainer, because it's sports fans would love it. They could have a ton of cameos from hockey players and celebrities around whatever city they decided to have win the cup. It would be a fun movie to see. I can't believe that hasn't been made already.
No, it's a good point.
It has taken some damage. Phil Pritchard has got his work cut out for him getting that thing put back together.
Yeah. Well, good luck with that, Phil. So overall, certainly the final started off with a bang.
Well, let me give one other note before you gave a lot of notes there. I thought for sure you would give this one. Corey Perry loses his 5th Stanley Cup in the past 6 seasons.
Yes.
He was on the Stars in 2020, the Canadiens in 2021, the Lightning in 2022, and the Oilers each of the last 2 seasons. Now, had he not won a Stanley Cup in his first year with the Ducks, it would be tragic. As it is, it's just humorous that this guy he's always on a team that's good enough to reach the Stanley Cup final, but never on a team that's good enough to win it. And 5 trips to the Stanley Cup final. And he has played, he passed, I forget who it was, but he has played more playoff games than any forward in NHL history now. So this is a guy that has been around for a long time. He's 40 years old, but 5 Stanley Cup losses in the last 6 years for Corey Perry.
Thoughts? I mean, look, there's still things to be decided, important things to be decided. You know, people throw out the dynasty word. I don't. I know that we're in a different age than when the Oilers won, I don't know what, 5 cups in 7 years, or the
Right.
Islanders winning those 4 in a row. So the goalposts have been moved as far as what kind of constitutes that kind of thing. And 2 in a row in this day and age is very impressive, but it's not unprecedented. Like we said, we saw Tampa Bay do it not that long ago. But it's still, I give Florida their due. And again, they've gone to 3 finals in a row as well. So I don't know. I don't really care for that dynasty word to be thrown out there. I don't even know what that really means in this day and age anymore, but it's certainly impressive, and they are deserving of all of the praise that they are getting. Absolutely. And we've talked about it. We've done this show now for, 19 seasons. And for many of those seasons, the Florida Panthers were an absolute afterthought. It was not a destination. It wasn't a place that was, they had one Cinderella season early on in there, and there was a lot of failure and a lot of spinning their wheels and a lot of not getting close to anything like this. So again, kudos to the entire organization and the front office and, for the things they've done. And we thought they were crazy to fire Andrew Brunette, and they bring in Paul Maurice, and it's been exactly the right move. And then, of course, this year, bringing in Marchand and Jones, and just everything it was touched by the Florida Panthers was gold. And they deserve all their accolades. I don't know, but the dynasty thing, I've actually heard people use that word, and I don't know. I don't know. After 2 in a row, I don't consider that a dynasty.
No, because if you call them a dynasty, then you have to say we've had 2 dynasties in the last 6 years, because the Lightning did the exact same thing. They won back-to-back Stanley Cups and went to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals. So were the Lightning a dynasty, and now this is a dynasty immediately after? No, you can't have 2 dynasties basically overlapping. I think you have to win 3 Stanley Cups in a fairly short period of time with the same team to be considered a dynasty. But that's all subjective. It's however you want to describe it. Like the Blackhawks of the 2010, they won 3 Stanley Cups in 6 years. Is that a dynasty? Maybe, but it wasn't. None of them were back to back. They lost in the first round twice. So in that era. So it's tough to say. I would like to see 3, though, to be considered an official dynasty. So I can argue with you about the Blackhawks, but that was a team that definitely would be considered a dynasty. The only one, I think, in the history of this show that you could make the argument for. Otherwise, there's a lot of teams that fit the bill. Pittsburgh won a couple within a close proximity, but not 3. So, yeah, it gets tough, but I think you need to win that 3rd one.
Yeah, the Kings won 2 and 3.
Yeah, the Kings won as well. Yeah, and I wouldn't consider them a playoffs or a dynasty.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there needs to be like a 3 and 4, or obviously 3 and 3, or even 3 and 5. I'd go so far as to say something like that. But yeah, 2 in a row, it's amazing. All the credit in the world, but I don't know. I would not use that word to describe them.
No, and but they got the chance to win 3 in a row next year, and they're going to be a team that is certainly a contender on paper. They're bringing a lot of people back, but as we said, they got people leaving as well, or at least potentially. So when you see the guys skate the puck, Brad Marchand is a free agent. Thomas Nosek is a free agent. Sam Bennett is a free agent. Aaron Ekblad is a free agent. Nate Schmidt, free agent. Jacob Megna, free agent. A lot of your depth and a lot of your star players are free agents this summer. That doesn't mean they can't re-sign them, but they have $19 million. That's not enough to re-sign all of those guys, obviously. So somebody's going to have to go, and it'll be interesting to see who they retain and who they replace. But that's the job for the front office, and they've made all the right moves in recent years. So no reason to think that this team is going to falter this coming summer.
Any final thoughts on the Stanley Cup final? Obviously, it started off amazing with the 2 overtimes. I thought overall it was a compelling, pretty competitive. I mean, the better team won in the end. I think it was pretty clear after you saw the results of the games and how the Oilers just were constantly fighting from behind, even though they were so good at that this year. There's only so many times, right, you can fall behind like that and expect to pull yourselves out of it. It just, the better team won. I thought it was a pretty good Stanley Cup final, and like I said, the better team won.
Absolutely, it's I find it hard to ever argue against the winner of a best of 7 series. The better team always wins those, in my opinion, because it takes the fluke moments out of it. You can win 1 game, 2 games due to some flukes, but 4 games, if you do that, you're the better team. And the Panthers winning 4 and 6 are the better team. And the fact that they beat this team last year, it's the Oilers are in a tough spot because they're obviously good enough to reach the Stanley Cup final. They've done it back-to-back years, but they're not good enough to beat that team. And so do you bring back as much as you can and just say, maybe the Panthers aren't there next year? Or do you, and then we don't have to face 2 Selke finalists in the up the middle? Or do you look at it as we have to make some slight adjustments to improve our team? And if so, where? I think I mentioned to you and Paul, friend of the Prick Boss, friend of the show, that 6 Selke candidates in the last 20 years have won the Stanley Cup and no Hart Trophy candidates have. So it just shows you what is valuable in the playoffs. And that's a 2-way center, a 2-way forward that can play great defense and shut people down. And in that matchup of Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl against Sasha Barkov, Barkov's won both times. So credit to them. It's going to be, I think a lot of teams will look at Florida and say, how can we do that? How can we build our team like that? And the trick is having they drafted Barkov, they drafted Ekblad, they paid for a guy that nobody wanted in Sergei Bobrovsky. If you can do that, if you can draft a number 1 pairing defenseman and a Selke candidate, Selke winning center, and then draft or trade for a goalie that nobody wants that turns into the guy everybody wants, then you're in a great position. The Kings did that. They drafted Kopitar, they drafted Doughty, they got Stanley Cups out of it. That's the key. So I think when we talk about our draft preview in the second period, we're going to mention some 2-way centers. And a lot of people are going to be like, oh, that's not what I want to see our team get. But that's the guy you're going to need to win cups, to win in the playoffs, is a 2-way center. And those guys are usually only found in the draft because they rarely hit free agency, because once teams find them, they never let them go.
All right, let's get to some news from the past week in the NHL. And I guess fortunately we had some news come down right before we were getting ready to record here. It involves Doug's favorite team. Not a surprise, a name that we've heard and rumored that would be traded time and again. But the Anaheim Ducks have sent forward Trevor Zegras to the Philadelphia Flyers for forward Ryan Poehling, a 2nd-round pick in 2025 and a 4th-round pick in 2026. Zegras is just 24 years old. 268 career games. He's got 67 goals and 186 points. Career high in goals with 23 and 65 points back in 2022-23. Last year, 57 games, 12 goals, 32 points. He's got 1 year left on a deal that's paying him $5.75 million, and he'll be a restricted free agent after next season. Ryan Poehling is 26. He's played in 283 career NHL games, total of 43 goals and 95 points. Last season, 68 games, he had 12 goals and 31 points. He'll make $1.9 million for next season and be a UFA after next season. Doug, your thoughts on this trade?
Well, I hate to see Trevor Zegras go, because I was excited to see what he could do under Coach Quenneville, and finally having a good NHL head coach behind his bench for the first time in 5 years. He had Dallas Eakins before that, Greg Cronin these last 2 years. And he showed, as you mentioned, back-to-back years of 23 goals, back-to-back years of over 60 points under Dallas Eakins. And then Greg Cronin comes in. He's a holdout. He gets in camp. He signs just before the season, gets injured, misses most of the season, only plays in 31 games, has 15 points, comes back this season, misses a lot of games due to injury, is not productive either. And I think the deal for Chris Kreider made him expendable. There's only so many winger spots. They've been talking about moving him back to center. Zegras is not ever going to play well defensively. He is an offensively gifted player, very creative, very talented at distributing the puck. But as a center, I don't know that it works because you need to be more defensively responsible. That's not his game. So if he's on the wing, the Ducks are loaded at left wing. And therefore, I don't know that they had a spot for him. I think he was expendable there. I'm curious. This frees up cap space. Not that they needed it. They now have $36 million. So Lord knows they can go crazy this summer if they actually get players to sign there. But I think it's an intriguing deal for Philadelphia. I'm surprised that was the team that wanted him. More of a blue collar city, more of a blue collar team, especially with Rick Tocchet.
That was my first thought as well. I wasn't surprised he was traded. I could certainly understand why other teams would have interest in him, but I was surprised it was that team. And as you said, that city doesn't seem to fit there. I know Jamie Drysdale's like his best friend who plays on the team, but that was my first thought, was like, ooh, Philadelphia. Okay.
Yeah. And they are certainly going to expect him to play both ways, and I don't think that's going to go too well. I wish him the best, though. He's a very fun player to watch, and he's one of those guys that if he has 30 points in a season, probably 18 of them are going to be highlight worthy. And so he's a very fun player to watch, extremely creative. I hope he stays healthy. I hope he plays very well. Ryan Poehling is a depth center, and I get that they want to make their bottom six better. I don't think this was about getting him. I think the Flyers needed to send a player and some cap back. So that was who it was. It's a short-term deal, 1-year deal. They get a second-round pick out of it. So I'm not in a vacuum. This is not a good trade for the Ducks. They obviously don't get the better of the players. Amazingly, the players had the same number of goals last year. Poehling's a depth center. Zegras is a top 6 winger, and they both had 12 goals last year. Both had 31 points. So that's doesn't speak well for Zegras' last season, but it's a fresh start for him. As you said, he gets back with his old friend, Jamie Drysdale, and I'll be very interested to see how Rick Tocchet and the Philadelphia Flyers utilize him. They have some great players. If he develops chemistry with Matvei Michkov, that could be absolutely electric. Those two guys have extremely high skill, so that could be something to keep an eye on in camp, how they utilize him. But for the Ducks, we cleared out a guy that obviously didn't fit in what Pat Verbeek is trying to build. Whether you want to believe it or not, I think he's been on the market for years, and they finally found a trade partner. Like I said, I think Chris Kreider made him expendable because he plays the same position in the same spot in the lineup. So I think it makes the Ducks bottom 6 better, but overall, they're not any better than they were yesterday. But it does give them a little bit more flexibility in cap. They can go a little bit bigger on some contracts if they need to when they re-sign players or get free agents. But this was, I think, more about getting a guy that's been on the market a long time out of the lineup and freeing up that roster spot for other players.
Jonathan Toews going to sign with his hometown Winnipeg Jets when free agency opens on July the 1st. The team announced on social media. Toews' deal will be 1 year base salary of $2 million plus several performance-based bonuses. He plays 20 games. He gets $550,000, 30 games, $550,000, 40, 50, 60, $550,000. So there you go. As far as games played, not a surprise there. Of course, former Blackhawks captain, 3-time Stanley Cup winner, named one of the greatest 100 players in the NHL back in 2017, coming back from missing 2 seasons with inflammatory and immune system issues. So it would be very interesting to see him in that uniform. But Jonathan Toews, you had mentioned it, and it made a lot of sense. 2 places he may be interested in going, reuniting with his old coach, Joel Quenneville in Anaheim, or going back home to Winnipeg, and he's going back to Winnipeg.
Yeah, it gives them a guy that we'll see how much he has left when we see him in the fall. But it gives them a guy that has leadership and playoff experience to help them get over the hump. as you mentioned, he's got $2 million base salary that could be as much as $7 million. If it's $7 million, they're absolutely delighted because that means they won the Stanley Cup. $1 million of that is if they win the Stanley Cup. So if he plays 50% of their games, he gets $250,000 per series. I love these incentive-laden contracts. I'd love to see these more often. You want to make the big money. You go out there and earn it with team success and by playing in games. It's not a guaranteed contract. But I get why they did this. It is just a 1-year deal. I thought he might be able to get a 2-year deal out of somebody, just to give him a little bit more security. But at 37, having taken a couple years off, I hope he comes back and is very effective. I hope he looks like the old Jonathan Toews and not an old Jonathan Toews. So it'll be interesting to see what he looks like in the fall and how well he can play over an 82-game season, not just for a couple weeks, but for an entire season. And if they manage his games kind of hey, we're playing a back-to-back, why don't you take the second night off kind of thing. We'll see how they manage it. But it definitely gives them an advantage down the middle as a depth center that can win faceoffs and knows how to win in the playoffs. I like that move for Winnipeg.
Yeah, we saw Gabriel Landeskog. He still hasn't gone through the rigors of a full season, but I think a lot of people were skeptical that he could ever come back. Of course, it was a knee injury that no one had ever come back from. So there was real evidence as to why you would be,
right,
speculative of that. So we'll see with Jonathan Toews, but it worked out at least in the short term for Landeskog. We'll see how Toews does coming back, but that it will be an interesting thing to watch for sure next season. Obviously, we are literally 1 week away from the start of free agency. We've got the draft coming up at the end of the week, so things are starting to move and turn. The Dallas Stars made a trade and re-signed a couple of players this week. They shipped out restricted free agent forward Mason Marchment to the Seattle Kraken for a 3rd-round pick in 2026 and a 4th-round pick in 2025. Marchment's 30 years old. He did have a 10-team no-trade clause. Apparently, Seattle wasn't on it, or maybe they were, and he said, okay, I'll go there. I don't know. But he tied a career high with 22 goals last season. He had 47 points in 62 games. He'll be a UFA after this coming season. He makes $4.5 million for this season. Dallas also re-signed 34-year-old forward Matt Duchene, 4 years, $8 million, 4.5 per season. He led the Stars with 30 goals and 82 points in 82 games this past season. Dallas also re-signs defenseman Niels Lundqvist, 1 year, $1.25 million, and re-signed forward Maverick Bourque, 1 year, $950,000.
Just to clarify, the Duchene contract, 4 years, $18 million.
What I say?
Average. You said $8 million.
Oh, sorry.
$4.5 million per season, and that's exactly what Marchment was making with Seattle, or was making with Dallas, and now makes for Seattle. So basically, they traded Mason Marchment's contract to be able to retain Matt Duchene. Can't blame them for that. I don't think Marchment's going to hurt them too much in the long term, but they still have work to do in Dallas. They only have $2.7 million in cap space. They have to find a way to retain Jamie Benn, Mikael Granlund, either retain or replace some depth guys here and there. And if you want to improve your team because you haven't been good enough to get past the Oilers in the Stanley Cup final or in the Stanley Cup playoffs, then you're going to have to make some moves there as well. So some work to be done, but that was the necessary piece. And I think they're still talking about potentially trading Jason Robertson, which doesn't make much sense. But the only reason that makes sense is because he makes $7.75 million. He does not have any no trade clause or no movement clause in there. The guys that do on that team, Mikko Rantanen, Tyler Seguin, Rupe Hintz, Matt Duchene now, Miro Heiskanen, Esa Lindell, none of them can be moved, nor would they want to, I would think. But I don't think they want to move Robertson either. It's just a matter of they need to find some money to be able to retain or replace players throughout the season and maintain their status as Stanley Cup contenders. So it'll be an interesting offseason for Dallas. But I like the move to retain Matt Duchene. He had an amazing season last year. I think 32 goals, which is, 30 he had last year and 82 points. That's fantastic for a guy of his age, and obviously is a great fit with that system. So retaining him in exchange for Mason Marchment, no-brainer for them, in my opinion.
Is that a hometown discount? Was that a hometown discount for them? He wanted to stay there, and I thought $4.5 million a year for a guy with 30 goals and 82 points is a pretty good get for the
Stars. It's a hell of a deal, but it's the term. It's, do you want a guy how many people were going to give him a 4-year deal.
Mm.
So he might have been able to get a little bit more term from them because he took a less value annually. But yeah, 4.5 million for 30 goals. Now, I don't think he's going to have 30 goals each year for this or maybe ever again. But if he's 20 goals, 4.5 million is still a bargain at this day and age with this cap.
I like the Mason Marchment pickup for Seattle. I know that they've got a lot of things to address there. I would just, I mean, I looked at it as a Kings fan. I would have loved to have had that guy for a 3rd and 4th round pick with the LA Kings. So I thought that was a pretty good get for Seattle.
Yeah, it's a rental though, most likely. I mean, he's got 1 year left. Maybe if he fits there and you like him, you retain him, but it definitely adds scoring ability and two-way play, which is what every team is looking to get. Like you said, if you can get a guy that can give you 20 goals and can play both ways, give you good minutes, honest minutes in the middle six, that's valuable. And he's got back-to-back 20-goal seasons. This isn't a fluke where he just had one out of the blue. He had 22 2 years ago, 22 this past year. I don't know that he will with a reduced talent base in Seattle, but he still should be good for 15 goals. And that's a decent amount for a guy that, like, as you said, can play some honest minutes. And if you do make the playoffs, will help you win once you get there.
Chicago Blackhawks re-signed forward Ryan Donato, 4 years, $16 million, $4 million a year. He was eligible to be a UFA on July 1st, 29 years old, career high 31 goals and 31 assists in 80 games last season. His previous career best was 16 goals in 2021-22 with Seattle and 18 assists in his first season with Chicago. I thought this was another player that probably could have got a little bit more out in free agency. Maybe he wanted to stay in Chicago, but 29 years old, career high last year, $4 million a year. I thought it was a good signing for Chicago.
Well, it's a great price, but I don't know that I would have. I think we talked about it last week on our free agency preview of different depth at center, and Duchesne and Donato were in there. If you miss out on the big guys, who do you get? And they were in the second tier. But do you really trust Ryan Donato to be a 30-goal scorer ever again? As you mentioned, his previous career high was 16. So he had a great year last season and perfect timing going into free agency. So I don't know that I expect him to score 30 again, but maybe 20, even though he's never done that before in his career. And he's not a young man. He's 29 years old. But as you said, a guy that's coming off a 31-goal season with unrestricted free agency, $4 million a year is a bargain. I don't love the term, and I don't love the fact that they gave him a modified no-trade clause throughout it because it limits their options going forward. But if he can continue to give you 20 goals for $4 million, that's absolutely a bargain. If he gets you anywhere near 30 again, it's one of the best contracts in the league. And if he drops off, I don't think it's that punitive of a contract going forward when the salary cap is going to be over 100 million in a couple of years. A $4 million anchor, as it were, only scoring 10 to 15 goals is not that bad. So it's low risk, but I don't think I would have wanted to sign him to a 4-year deal coming off an obvious career year.
Carolina Hurricanes re-signed 30-year-old forward Eric Robinson, 4-year deal, $6.8 million. He'll make $1.7 million per season. He was going to be a UFA, career high in goals with 14 and points with 32 last season.
I mean, amazing to me that Eric Robinson gets this deal. Not that he's not worth it, but just the fact that he gets a 4-year deal and gets a no trade clause is good for him. I mean, I'm sure he couldn't sign it fast enough. He likes being there. He's a good fit with them. I don't know that he would have been as good a fit with most other teams or would have had to adjust and find his role. He knows exactly what his role is with the Hurricanes and vice versa. So I get that, but a 4-year deal for him, man, good for him. That is that's an absolutely great contract for a guy that was bouncing around the league from Columbus to Buffalo and found a home in Carolina.
We mentioned Seattle and Chicago already. They also did business together in a trade. Andre Burakovsky goes to the Blackhawks for Joe Veleno. Burakovsky, 10 goals, 37 points in 79 games last season. He's owed $5.5 million per season, under contract for 2 more years. Veleno had 8 goals, 17 points in 74 games, split between Chicago and Detroit last season. The Kraken also signed defenseman Cale Fleury, 2 years, $890,000 per season. And Chicago also placed defenseman TJ Brody on unconditional waivers for the purpose of buying out his contract.
Yeah, Veleno, I remember being a guy with Detroit back in the day that we were looking as a potential impact player. He's now a journeyman and is not looking to is trying to find a home. This, I think, more creates cap space, certainly in the present and in the long term for Seattle. They get about 2.2 million in cap space this year, and then next year they're completely out from with underneath Burakovsky's contract at 5.5 million. So gives them flexibility going forward.
Ottawa Senators signed 25-year-old restricted free agent forward Fabian Zitterlund, 3-year deal, $12.825 million. He'll make $4.28 million per season. He had 41 points, 19 goals, 22 assists in 84 games, split last season between the Sharks and Senators. Boston Bruins re-signed Mason Lohrei, 2-year deal worth $6.4 million, made $3.2 million per season. New York Rangers re-signed restricted free agent forward Matt Rempe, 2-year deal, $1.95 million. He'll 22-year-old will make $975,000 per season. Ducks signed 23-year-old forward Nikita Nesterenko, 2-year deal, $1.57 million. He'll make $787,000 per season. And the LA Kings re-signed 33-year-old goalie Phoenix Copley, 1-year deal, $775,000.
My only comment on all of that is, how is Matt Rempe still only 22?
I actually thought, how is Trevor Zegras still 24? He seems a little older than that. But
yeah, he's been in the league 6 years. So yeah. I mean, when you come in immediately after the draft, you get old quick. But yeah, still just 24. I think it's a make or break year for him, though. Big year for him. He knows that.
Anything I missed? Anything else you wanted to comment on that happened this past week in the NHL?
No, we should probably hit refresh and make sure there were no other trades. But I think that's
actually a good idea. We can do that right now. Let's see. The Flames have signed Justin Kirkland to a 1-year extension worth $900,000. I honestly don't know who that is.
That's the Costco version of an NHL player.
Ah, yes. Kirkland brand. Well done. Yep. That's all I see. I don't see anything else.
Then we're good until next week. The beauty of doing the show one day later is usually, one, we got the Zegras trade, but usually that it means there's less news for next week. That will not be the case this week. There's going to be a ton of news this week to get us caught up for next week's show.
That is very, very true. All right, that'll do it for our first period and our YouTube show. If you enjoyed what you saw, you want to check out the remaining 2 periods of the podcast, just go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and search Puck Podcast. If you're if you're listening to the podcast already, we've got the second and third periods coming right up. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm Eddie Garcia. He's Doug Stolhand, and we'll talk to you next time with another edition of the Puck Podcast.